So when I was in 7th grade, we were given this assignment to figure out what you wanted to be when you grew up, and then you had to go find someone who was doing that thing and come back and present what you learned to the class. And it was a nightmare. This was me when I was 13, and you can tell by the height of my bangs that I barely knew who I was, much less who I wanted to be. So after a lot of debate and agony, I landed on my career ambition to be a motivational speaker. I studied Tony Robbins, and I gave a motivational speech in front of my entire 7th grade class. And I won't say that it went particularly well. It became my go-to story for what was your most embarrassing moment. But some part of this was true for me. I wanted to figure out how to make positive change for people. So I ended up pursuing a career in social work and eventually in academia. And as a professor and a youth researcher, I may not have strayed so far from that early goal. I spent a great deal of my career studying and advocating for social emotional skills training for youth. So there's a vast body of rigorous research that shows that manualized interventions that train youth on skills like how to communicate or how to solve problems are effective in helping them avoid a lot of problems: school dropout, substance use, delinquency. Typically, an adult stands up at the front of a room and they teach youth new skills, and then they give them opportunities to practice those skills in the classroom. But I was more interested in the kids who weren't in those seats, the kids who were missing from school-based prevention programs or who couldn't engage in that kind of intervention. Those who were truant, those who couldn't make it to school, those who were homeless. And so I struggled with the fact that the skills being taught seemed genuinely useful for all youth, but we were missing a huge and important group. Homeless youth typically run away from home for unbearable living situations. There's abuse and violence and rejection at home, and so they leave and couch surf with friends and family until they run out of places to stay, and then the streets are really a last resort. Some of them will use shelters and drop-ins. A small group of them will make it into transitional housing apartments. But our underfunded system is typically case management. So typically youth get a list of phone numbers and appointments with adults to help them meet their basic needs: food, shelter, and employment. And these services are provided, and they align very well with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which probably is not new to most of you. It's a long-standing theory of human behavior, and for the most part is accepted in many of our schools of social work. So one must first achieve these bottom-level needs, food and shelter, before they move on to try to seek higher-order needs like connection and self-esteem, and then ultimately self-actualization. And the problem was that in homeless services, while we're providing services at the basic need level, youth are pretty hesitant to engage in them. So they're often underutilized. Youth don't necessarily want to follow through with all those case management appointments. They're hesitant to communicate and connect with service providers. So there seems to be a disconnect. And I became more interested in what's at the top of the hierarchy: self-actualization. So here's Maslow's definition. Self-actualized people have some mission in life, some task to fulfill, some problem outside themselves, which enlists much of their energies. In general, these tasks are non-personal or unselfish, concerned rather with the good of mankind in general. So while Maslow, the one we know most about, says you have to start at the bottom and build these basic needs, and then as you work your way up, you can reach higher and higher needs, his later work actually posited that for some, perhaps frustration and struggle to meet those basic needs could help someone reach self-actualization. So perhaps self-actualization, this finding a larger purpose or mission, particularly one that benefits other people, shouldn't be a goal that we reserve for those fortunate enough to have homes and educations. So I recently embarked on a project that took me way outside my comfort zone. Our research team set out to engage homeless youth in a different way. We started a photo voice project, and the goal of the project was to join with a group of young people experiencing homelessness and to help them identify social issues that are important to them and to their community. We gave them tablets with cameras, and we brought a professional photographer in to teach them techniques in photography in order to capture their own perspectives on the world. And a key aspect of this photo voice and YPAR more generally is the sharing of power with young people. So the youth had to decide together what to photograph, what issues to advocate for, and how to respect differences within the group. One major issue that youth decided to focus on was boredom. This photo was taken by Reno, who was quiet but committed to the project. And one day, Reno came to the shelter and he disclosed that he had recently quit a job The job was in sanitation. It involved loading trays into the dishwasher. And he knew he shouldn't have quit his job because he needed the paycheck, but he said, it wasn't hard, but that was the problem. So the menial task was one that made him feel undervalued. He seemed to feel guilty. He was apologizing that he felt like this job was beneath him, but there was some part of him that realized he could never really achieve his talents and skills in that sort of environment. So Reno and other youth, they wanted to be challenged. They wanted to be a part of something that required them to think and to provide input. They wanted to feel valued and like they had a sense of purpose. And without this challenge, they felt sad and angry, and they felt lonely, and the only identity that joined them was their identity of homelessness. Youth shared that this lack of purpose led to sadness that led to apathy and trouble. So this picture by Cole of a destroyed bathroom at the shelter reads, when you're depressed, you just stop caring about your health and your hygiene. People who go to work every day don't come back and leave things like this. It smells like pee and mold. I don't know anyone who's just super happy in life with a bathroom that looks like this. So youth discussed that with nothing to do, they were more likely to use drugs, to spend time with the wrong people, to get in trouble with the law. But they also described a more subtle complacency. With boredom, they felt less motivated to work towards making things better for themselves. They sort of became comfortable with a lack of purpose or a lack of structure, and then didn't seek as many opportunities to help them exit the streets. Our photo voice session project ended with a community exhibit where youth could share their voices and their photos with the community. And youth got to name the exhibit, and they chose the name Asking for Change, which was a play on words that showed the community that they're not just standing on the corner asking for spare change, but that they're activists asking for social change. And they agreed on a common tagline that they would each introduce their work with, and it said, I may be homeless, but I'm also. And they completed that statement with their own identities and aspirations. So here's Gwen sharing, I may be homeless, but I'm also a writer, poet, director, compassionate towards people, funny, like to do impressions, loved, feminist, LGBT rights activist, fun to be around, and a hard worker. We were surprised when the project ended that the youth didn't want it to end, so they created a Facebook page group so that they could stay in touch with one another. They did interviews with media. 2 of them served as freelance photographers for a piece on homelessness in Denver. Here they're volunteering at a youth summit where they're sharing the project with another group of youth. Research behind youth voice interventions is relatively young. Emily Ozer's work in the Bay Area is among few randomized trials where she found that youth participation increased leadership skills, leadership behaviors, and youth's connection to their schools and communities. And Yoli Anion's work, a consultant on our team, found that youth voice in West Oakland promoted youth skills in time management and public speaking and resolving conflict and strategic thinking. This suggests that in finding a sense of purpose, something bigger than themselves to be involved in, youth may build some of the critical skills that they could be missing in the traditional classroom. Our biggest outcome for the Photo Voice project was the degree youth felt socially connected to others. These ratings doubled by the end of the project. At an exit interview, one young person shared, "It makes me actually want to make change in the world and actually try to get laws passed. Not like become a senator or anything, but become a prominent person who actually wants to make change in this effed up world. That's just what I want to do." To be prominent means to be important, influential, noteworthy. This project also changed me personally and as a researcher. Sharing power was unpredictable. The data were messy. This required a lot of flexibility and spontaneity, not my strong suits as a researcher. But the impact on the young people, the connection we had to them, the way we truly understood their experience, and most of all, the impact they had on the community was powerful. When I finished my PhD, I'll admit my goals were a bit self-focused, to survive academia. I wanted to first get a job, and then I wanted to get tenure. But I also wanted to be a prominent person, a prominent or influential researcher, and I'm thinking most of us do. Academia prescribes a fairly simple script for becoming a prominent researcher. You should publish peer-reviewed articles, ideally in high-impact journals, and you should get funding. And I think there's a great deal we as researchers can learn from these young people about how to spend our time and effort. We should move beyond the basic productivity to seek real impact. What if we as a profession reimagine prominence? What if it meant impact or benefit for the communities we aim to serve? Our metrics would need to expand to include things like testifying in state government, or sharing our findings at a local agency's board meeting, or mobilizing communities to identify and advocate for their needs. I'm not suggesting that there's any one method or approach that's best, but that we each give ourselves permission to make space for work that is meaningful to us, that in pursuit of work that has real impact, we could be best positioned to write prominent papers and get funding, but also to find motivation and fulfillment in our work. So I'll wrap up with a quote from my 7th grade role model, Tony Robbins, that reads, "It's not what we get, but who we become, what we contribute, that gives meaning to our lives." It turns out finding a sense of purpose can be motivating to us all. Thank you.